The Quiet Revolution, How Bishop J. Drew Sheard Rebuilt COGIC from the Inside Out There, is a church in Memphis, Tennessee, that most Americans have never heard of, and yet it is the fourth largest Protestant denomination in the entire country. It has roughly 6 million members. It has churches on nearly every continent. And for decades, behind the music, the shouting, the choirs, and the Sunday hats, it was quietly drowning in debt. This is the Church of God in Christ, known simply as COGIC. And this is the story of the man who, in just a few years, cleared its books, rebuilt its reputation, and dragged a 129-year-old institution into the modern era. His name is Bishop J. Drew Sheard, and if you have never heard of him, that is about to change. Because what he has done since 2021 is one of the most underreported leadership turnarounds in American religious life. Let's start with who this man actually is, because the story only makes sense once you understand where he came from. John Drew Sheard was born on January 1st, 1959, in Detroit, Michigan. The son of Bishop John Henry Sheard and Mother Willie Mae Sheard. He grew up inside the church, not adjacent to it. He was saved as a young man under Bishop John Seth Bailey and felt his call to ministry early. But Sheard did not skip education for religion the way some assume preachers do. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Education and then a Master of Education in Mathematics, both from Wayne State University. Think about that for a second. The man who would one day be handed the finances of a 6 million-member global denomination trained as a mathematics educator. That detail matters more than it seems, because everything that follows in this story is, at its core, a story about numbers, discipline, and structure. In 1988, Sheard began pastoring at what became Greater Emmanuel Institutional Church of God in Christ in Detroit, growing it into one of the largest congregations in Michigan. He married Karen Clark Sheard, herself a Grammy-nominated gospel vocalist and member of the legendary Clark Sisters, and together they raised 2 children, including Kiara Sheard, who became a recording artist in her own right. So, before Sheard ever touched a national budget, he had already spent over 3 decades building something real at the local level, brick by brick, member by member. His rise through COGIC's leadership was not sudden either. He was consecrated a jurisdictional bishop over the Michigan North Central jurisdiction in 2010. In 2012, he was elected to COGIC's General Board, the 12-bishop body that functions as the denomination's top governing council, the equivalent of a corporate board of directors for a religious institution of this size. He was re-elected to that board in 2016 and again in 2021. And then, on March 20th, 2021, in the middle of a global pandemic that had upended nearly every institution on earth, the General Assembly of the Church of God in Christ elected J. Drew Sheard as its 8th presiding bishop and chief apostle, succeeding Bishop Charles E. Blake Sr., who requested emeritus status after leading the church since 2007. Now here is where the story gets interesting, because Sheard did not inherit a church in good financial health. He inherited an institution carrying significant national debt, built up over years of overhead, legacy obligations, and a headquarters infrastructure that had not kept pace with modern nonprofit management. Multiple official COGIC biographical records now confirm that Sheard's financial stewardship led to the complete elimination of the denomination's national debt, with the church's own materials pointing to 2023 as the year the books were finally cleared. Let that sink in for a moment. A church with 6 million members, operating across the United States and internationally, had been carrying debt for years. And within roughly 2 years of taking office, that debt was gone. How did he actually do it? This is not a story about a single miracle offering. It is a story about discipline. One of the signature moves of his administration was something called the I Love My Church initiative, a national giving campaign designed to restore liquidity to the general church. According to COGIC's own official records, that single initiative raised more than $2.5 million in less than a year. That is not small dollar guilt tripping. That is a coordinated, national fundraising strategy executed with the precision of a corporate capital campaign, aimed directly at stabilizing an institution's operating cash flow. But raising money is only half the equation. The other half is spending less of it, and this is where Sheard's mathematics background seems to show up most clearly in his governance style. His administration pursued strategic outsourcing of certain high-overhead internal functions, including human resources and payroll operations, shifting them to external providers rather than maintaining costly in-house departments. In the corporate world, this is a standard efficiency play. In a religious denomination built on generations of tradition and entrenched departmental structures, it is a genuinely disruptive move, and it takes a particular kind of institutional courage to make it. Sheard also restructured leadership across multiple departments during his tenure, including changes within COGIC's World Missions Department and various auxiliary assignments, signaling that loyalty to tradition would not shield underperforming structures from reform. This is the part of Sheard's leadership that rarely makes headlines, because administrative reorganization does not trend on social media the way a viral sermon clip does. But ask anyone who has ever tried to turn around a struggling nonprofit, a university, or a legacy corporation, and they will tell you, the unglamorous, boring spreadsheet and org chart work is almost always the actual difference between an institution that survives and one that slowly bleeds out. Then there is Mason Temple. If you know anything about American civil rights history, that name should stop you in your tracks. Mason Temple in Memphis is not just COGIC's headquarters. It is one of the most historically significant buildings in the entire civil rights movement. It is where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his final speech, "I've Been to the Mountaintop," on April 3, 1968, the night before he was assassinated. That building carries the weight of American history inside its walls. And according to reporting on Sheard's administration, his leadership helped secure a grant from Shelby County, reported at roughly $242,000, to renovate and modernize the historic headquarters. Preserving a building like that is not just facilities management. It is stewardship of a piece of the American story, and it reflects a broader theme in Sheard's tenure: protecting the institution's past while dragging its operations into the present. Sheard's reelection tells you almost everything you need to know about how his first term was received internally. On November 12, 2024, COGIC's General Assembly re-elected Bishop Sheard to a second four-year term as presiding bishop and chief apostle, and according to multiple reports, he was re-elected by acclamation. In an institution built on democratic assembly voting among thousands of bishops, pastors, and delegates, acclamation is not a formality, it is a statement. It means the body did not just tolerate his leadership, it actively affirmed it without meaningful contest. Now let's talk about something that goes beyond spreadsheets and renovations, because Sheard's tenure has also been defined by an unusually aggressive push into civic and social partnerships, the kind of institutional relationships that most denominations talk about but rarely actually build. In 2023, Sheard formed a partnership with Tennessee Governor Bill Lee, working alongside the Tennessee Department of Children's Services and the Shelby County Department of Children's Services to provide transitional housing support for young people entering the state's foster care system. This is not a symbolic ribbon cutting. Foster care transition housing is one of the most persistent and under-resourced gaps in America's child welfare system. And getting a governor's office to formally partner with a religious denomination on it signals real institutional trust. Sheard's administration also developed a national workforce partnership with Waste Management, the massive publicly traded environmental services company, aimed at training and employing formerly incarcerated individuals at a living wage. Think about what that partnership actually represents. It is not a food drive. It is not a clothing donation. It is a direct pipeline connecting a faith institution's community network to a Fortune 500 company's hiring pipeline, specifically targeting one of the most employment-discriminated populations in America, people with criminal records trying to re-enter the workforce. That is the kind of program that changes individual lives in a measurable, trackable, economic way, not just a spiritual one. And then, in February 2025, came what may be the most historically significant civic milestone of Sheard's tenure. He was elected to the National Board of Directors of the NAACP, the nation's oldest and most prominent civil rights organization. According to COGIC's official announcement and independent reporting from outlets covering the appointment, this marked the first time in COGIC's history that a leader of the denomination has served on the NAACP's national board. NAACP President and CEO Derek Johnson publicly welcomed the appointment alongside other new board members elected that year. Sheard himself said the collaboration between COGIC and the NAACP would allow the two historic institutions to amplify their shared work in the fight for justice and equality. When you consider that COGIC was founded in 1897 by Charles Price Jones and Charles Harrison Mason, both of whom were disfellowshipped by white Baptist associations in the Jim Crow South, and that the church has deep, generational roots in the Black church tradition and the civil rights movement, a formal NAACP board seat is not just a nice honor. It is a full-circle moment connecting COGIC's founding history to its future civic role. Sheard's disaster response record during his tenure has also drawn attention, with reports describing rapid emergency fundraising efforts to support communities hit by natural disasters, including wildfire relief efforts in California and support for tornado-affected communities in the Midwest, whatever the exact dollar figures on any single campaign. The consistent pattern across his tenure is the same. When disaster strikes, COGIC's national leadership under Sheard moves quickly to organize a coordinated giving response rather than leaving relief efforts purely to individual local congregations. For an organization with 6 million members spread across the country, that kind of centralized, rapid mobilization capability is not something you build overnight. It requires financial infrastructure, communication systems, and trust in leadership, all things that were arguably strengthened by the very debt elimination and structural reforms we talked about earlier in this video. There is also an academic dimension to this story that deserves attention. COGIC operates its own institution of higher education, All Saints University, and during Sheard's tenure, the university has moved forward on accreditation progress under new presidential leadership, part of a broader effort to strengthen the denomination's educational infrastructure alongside its financial and civic reforms. For a religious body focused on training the next generation of pastors, missionaries, and lay leaders, a properly accredited university is not a side project. It is workforce development for the church's own future. So, what does all of this add up to? If you step back and look at the last 5 years of COGIC's institutional history as a single narrative, the pattern is remarkably consistent. A mathematics-trained pastor with 3 decades of local ministry experience takes over a national denomination carrying real financial strain. Rather than leaning purely on spiritual rhetoric to will the problem away, he applies structural discipline, national giving campaigns with specific targets, outsourced overhead functions, departmental reorganization, and transparent budget stabilization. The debt gets eliminated. The historic headquarters gets modernized. And once the financial house is in order, the institution pivots outward, building formal partnerships with a state governor's office, a Fortune 500 company, and the nation's leading civil rights organization while investing in its own university's academic credibility. None of this happened through a single viral moment or a single dramatic sermon. It happened through what Sheard himself and others around COGIC have started calling Drew-ology, a leadership philosophy built around one deceptively simple idea: focus relentlessly on meeting people's practical, real-world needs and let the results speak for themselves. Whether or not you are a member of the Church of God in Christ, whether or not you have ever set foot in a Pentecostal service, there is something worth studying here about institutional turnaround. Most large legacy organizations, religious or otherwise, do not fail because of a lack of mission or a lack of passionate people. They fail because of unmanaged debt, bloated overhead, and leadership too afraid of tradition to make structural change. Bishop J. Drew Sheard's tenure at COGIC offers a rare, well-documented case study of an institution doing the opposite, confronting its numbers honestly, cutting what needed to be cut, building the partnerships that mattered, and coming out the other side stronger, more solvent, and more civically engaged than it went in. That is not a small accomplishment for any organization. And for a 129-year-old church with 6 million members scattered across the globe, it might just be one of the most consequential leadership stories in American religious life that almost nobody outside the church has actually heard. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into leadership, institutions, and the stories behind the numbers, and drop a comment letting us know what organization or leader you want us to break down next.